J.C. Newman Cigar Company has survived everything in the last 130 years. Just to name a few, the Spanish Influenza, the Great Depression, both world wars, numerous recessions in several different decades, and even the 2020 pandemic most recently. There's only been two cigar booms in the last 130 years, the 1940s and the 1990s. Why was that?
But the enjoyment of cigars has ebbed and flowed over time. In the 1940s, during World War II, there was a great demand for cigars. The government was buying up as many cigars as we and every other cigar maker could manufacture. The challenge is the boom quickly led to a bust because many of the GIs left the United States smoking cigars and returned smoking cigarettes. So the consumption of cigars plummeted after World War II. In the 1990s, with the introduction of Cigar Aficionado magazine, cigars became very popular again. And that led a lot of people to try cigars for the first time and find out they really enjoy them. And so that expanded the consumer base. Cigars became popular again, but then the industry fell off a cliff in the early 2000s after the cigar boom. And it's truthfully, it's very, very hard when demand increases, very hard when demand decreases, because we're rolling cigars today with tobacco that was in the ground 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So we're planning today for what we are going to roll 5 years from now. And so to make adjustments on the fly quickly is not easy.
Yeah, it's something most people wouldn't think about.
Yeah.
Right? Just like
Exactly.
wine too.
Right.
If you start, you're kind of committed.
Exactly.
So tell me how the embargo with Cuba affected cigar smoking as well. Because that kind of also put a damper of where we received the tobacco and how that happened too.
So 100 years ago, Tampa was the fine cigar capital of the world. More cigars were made here than anywhere else on the planet. In that time, most of Tampa's cigars were made with Cuban tobacco. Tobacco was grown in Cuba, and then the cigars were rolled in Tampa. And just to reinforce what I said a second ago, more cigars were made in Tampa with Cuban tobacco than in Cuba itself. Tampa really was cigar city and the cigar capital of the world. And then overnight in 1962, President Kennedy signed the Cuban embargo, which stopped us and everyone else from being able to import Cuban tobacco into the United States. It was a huge shock to the industry. Overnight, we lost our supply of our prime ingredient. Thankfully, then, just like today, we age our tobacco. So we and every cigar factory here in Tampa had an inventory of Cuban tobacco that served as a bridge and a lifeline, bought us some time to be able to figure out what to do next. And then the industry pivoted to other regions, but it was a huge shock, and it started to depress the cigar market a little bit, and that slide continued into the 70s and the 80s until the cigar boom of the early 1990s.
Fascinating. On November 1st, 1990, J.C. Newman Cigar Company partnered with Arturo Fuente, another family that lives in Tampa Bay. Describe that story and why it's so important that you guys have remained together.
100 years ago, there were 150 large cigar factories rolling cigars here in Ybor City in West Tampa, in the Tampa Bay area. But one by one, in the second half of the 20th century, those factories here in Tampa started to close. They either went out of business or moved overseas to Latin America, where labor is a lot cheaper because cigars are a handcrafted product. Labor costs are very important, are a huge component of the cost of cigars. And so by the late 80s and 1990, we realized that the J.C. Newman and Arturo Fuente families were just a couple of companies still left here in Tampa. And at that time, the Fuente family decided to focus their efforts on their new factory in the Dominican Republic and didn't have time to make cigars in Tampa or sell cigars in the United States. And so my grandfather, Stanford Newman, and Carlos Fuente Sr. shook hands and decided to work together. Carlos Fuente Sr. focused on rolling some of the best cigars in the world in the Dominican Republic for his company and made some cigars for my family. And then we agreed to sell the Arturo Fuente cigars in the United States through our sales team. And it's been a partnership that has endured ever since.
Very cool. All established on a handshake too.
Yes.
When they really meant something, which is very, very cool. It's
Yeah.
awesome. It really shows, like I said, the ethos of your family to stand by your product and one another too, because you've really stood the test of time.